Hey there, we are going to have an airline pilot answer passenger questions this summer of 2024 with all of the airlines and airplane issues in the news. We have some questions from my Instagram audience. The first one is, what are the issues with Boeing with pieces of planes falling off mid-flight? How do you feel about that? How should we respond to that?
Boeing's been having some production issues. I don't work for Boeing, so I'm not quite sure about what the issues are. The good news is it's gotten the attention of the media, which gets the attention of the FAA, and so the FAA is inside of Boeing right now, inside all their production facilities, inspecting all the airplanes that come out as they come out of the factory. So there's always someone there watching. So I think Boeing's problems will get fixed now that there's a lot of attention on it. So,
do you have any tips or tricks for passengers who are really scared of flying, or when there is turbulence, what they can do if they're really scared, or how to not be scared?
So first thing to do is just look at your weather. Look at the weather of where you're flying from and where you're going to. Just look at a map and see what there's weather out there. And you are always welcome at most airlines, certainly mine. Ask the flight attendant when you're boarding the airplane if she can go talk to the pilots, and just simply tell the pilots you're a nervous flyer, and we'll do our best to tell you exactly where we expect to see turbulence or we expect it to be smooth. If you're really nervous about turbulence, I suggest you try to sit closer to the front of the plane. That's not necessarily the safer part. That's just, if you think of a plane like a boat, the front of the boat tends to sway less in the air than the back of the boat does. So it just tends to be a little bit more, less of a type of roller coaster. If we do encounter turbulence, then that's probably the most preferable place to sit if you're very nervous about it.
Now, we have a whole video where he explains turbulence more, and we give some tips and tricks of things that you can do in your airplane seat. I absolutely hate turbulence, so I'm going to put that in the iCards up here and in the first comment with other links for you for some other videos that he's answered some funny or odd questions about airline travel. Will you give them an overview of why there is turbulence and why it can come from out of nowhere, or how?
Most turbulence is associated with two different masses of air, or air rising at one rate versus the air mass next to it. Most turbulence we can predict with near weather systems, thunderstorms, stuff like that. But there is a type of turbulence they call clear air turbulence, which there's absolutely no way to predict, and no one can really explain where it comes from or why it's there. So you just have to do what the crew says. When you're at your seat, keep your seatbelt fastened. We have a ton of software now and stuff about preventing turbulence. And in other words, if an airplane near me experiences it, we all share a lot of information now. So I get updates what other airplanes that are around me are seeing. And if it's something that they're experiencing, then that gives us time to get everybody seated, including the flight attendants, so that if we do encounter turbulence, then no one's going to get hurt because everybody's seated in with their seatbelts on.
Several passengers have asked, what are the best seats in an airplane? And you have to fly in the back of the airplane a lot. If they need you to fill in for something, what do you think are the best ones, besides first class?
I think all the seats in an airplane are the safest place to sit. But if you're asking for where's the most preferable place in terms of smoothness,
or just the best seats.
Oh, the best seats? It just depends on the airline. All the airlines kind of configure their airplanes differently. But besides first class, any seat with a little bit more leg room, which if you're willing to help out in an evacuation, the overwing exits tend to have more room because that's the aisle that people are going to run through to get off the airplane. So that tends to be bad, but you have to help out if you're going to sit there. So
I saw on the news that a man was launched into the overhead bins, and a lady a couple of months ago, like for her 5 minutes of fame or whatever, she got into the overhead bins. Like, could that ever happen?
Well, I'm sure you could crawl up there, but that's not where people stay. And there are weight limits to those overhead bins. So.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what they are by airplane. So.
Okay. Why are the bathrooms so small?
The bathrooms are so small in airplanes because airlines make money taking people places. So if you want to make the bathroom bigger, you're going to have to take away some seats out of the airplane, and therefore that's less money the airline earns. So they try to find a happy medium. Some airlines have done a horrible job of making the bathrooms so tiny, but that's up to how the airline chooses to configure the cabin of the airplane.
And a question that we get asked a lot in our Travel Tips by Laurie videos is it safe to drink the water?
So most airlines go through the chlorination process of all their water systems, but that's going to be up to you, and how often that gets done, I do not know.
And we have always had coffee or hot tea in 20-something, 25 years. We always have drunk it.
Because it's high temperature, so.
Just not the sink water.
Right, not cold water out of the airplane.
Right after the world shut down and airlines started flying again, they started marketing how much gets cleaned between flights. Do you know how much gets cleaned and what does not get cleaned?
Most hard surfaces get cleaned between flights, seat backs or tray tables, seat belts, armrests, and then some countries require more extensive cleaning. So it just depends on where the airplane is being routed from and routed to. But for the most part, most turns, every time an airplane comes someplace, it does get some cleaning, but then there are other times where it gets an in-depth cleaning.
Okay.
And that again depends on the airline and what the current CDC guidance is regarding that.
As a family, we've taken a river cruise trip, and he's gone to drive cars in Germany. What are some tips for sleeping during a long flight?
I would try to deprive yourself of any kind of naps the day of the trip, especially to the US. You tend to leave in the evenings to go to Europe. But I would just try to deprive yourself so that you're actually tired when you get on the airplane. But it's going to be different for everybody. Some people suggest melatonin. It just depends on how well you sleep on an airplane. Some people do really good, can sleep anywhere. Other people just can't get comfortable depending on where they're at. So. Just going to have to realize that travel is taking you out of your normal rhythm when you travel overseas. And so how to best cope with it kind of varies on the individual.
But it's worth it to have that delicious, no preservative croissant again. We've also found that it changes as you get older, because we had a lot harder time with jet lag these two trips to Europe. I mean, it took us like 5 days to get on their time zone. And by then we're coming back home. One tip also is to talk to your doctor about some medicine to help you sleep during the flight, but to know this, to test it out before that day of your flight to see how you respond to it. It might wire you up like that, but just talk to your doctor. Another question that we get asked is, do you use the TSA approved locks or the locks on your luggage?
I usually don't use locks, but you're more than welcome to, as long as the TSA can get in there if there's something they see on the x-ray.
We've never used them before. And we always use hotel safes, right? And you do too, in all the countries you go to. Can you explain your work hours and why a lot of times during summer weather, planes are delayed or flights are canceled because of crew, when the weather outside their window is perfectly fine?
So my work day is cannot be scheduled for more than eight work hours in a day, which is standard. That is limited by the FAA, and that's scheduled. That's not how many hours I can fly in a day. That's just how many my airline can schedule me for no more than 8 hours, unless they add a third pilot to the crew, and then that can change that. But airlines route their airplanes all over the country. Your airplane that you're going to fly on may have 6 legs prior to getting to where you are. And so if there's weather issues on the third leg and it delays it in, let's say, the East Coast, and it's eventually making itself to the middle of the country where you are, let's just say, then your flight's going to be late. And it's, even though your weather's great, it's because the airplane got tied up in weather that was 3 cities ago before it came. So summer weather too is the later in the day, the worse the weather gets. So the travel tip there is try to go early in the summer, because that's usually you beat the thunderstorm activity, which is what drives most of our delays in the summer.
Is there always turbulence over like the Rocky Mountains or a mountainous terrain?
It's more common just because the air is sloping up the mountain. If it's blowing from one direction, it tends to go up the mountain, and then once it gets to the top, it just has kind of little curves or curls when it reaches the top of the peak. So yes, definitely have more turbulence activity near mountains than you do, let's say, over Kansas.
Is it true that if you take off too soon after a really big airplane that you could get
Yes, you can
turbulence
you can get caught in their wake, similar to a boat. An airplane's wings creates a separation of air, and then at the back of the wing, when the air comes back together, it has what they call vortices or some turbulence associated with it. So we normally limit, or the FAA air traffic control limits about 5 miles after a heavy airplane takes off before we take off, just to let those wingtip vortices dissipate.
And can you assure anybody who is still just petrified of flying, of how seriously pilots take it?
Yeah, we're in the plane with you. We don't like rough rides either. It's no fun. Turbulence is something we take very seriously. It causes a lot of injuries, mainly to our flight attendants. So we have lots of steps in place to try to mitigate any injuries related to turbulence. So the biggest thing for us is preventing any injuries associated with it. Can't always get out of it, can't always predict when it's coming, but as soon as we know about it, we try to lock the airplane down so that if we do encounter it, nobody's going to get hurt because they're all seated where they're supposed to with their seatbelt fastened.
One question that a passenger had is, as the airplane is descending, why does it seem like they speed up and then they slow down as they approach the airport? And is it automatic, or were you not going fast enough? And now because sometimes it seems like it's so slow that you're just going to drop down.
Mm-hmm. So when we take off and get to the cruise altitude, that's when we want to go the fastest because that's when the plane is the cleanest. It's all very clean. There's no drag out there. But if you think about going into rush hour freeway and everyone's trying to get on the same X ramp, when we go to large and busy airports, they're trying to funnel in lots of airplanes into one piece of pavement. And so to do that, you have to slow everybody down so that you can meter how the traffic is coming. And airplanes cruise at 500 miles an hour, but we cannot land at 500 miles an hour. So we have to get to a speed that's slow enough that we can get some drag out there and get ourselves to an approach speed on the ground so that we're touching down at a reasonable speed. So all those combined together is why it does seem like you're going faster in the descent because gravity's helping push the airplane towards the ground. And then once we get in the airport environment, we have to slow down so that we can merge in with all the other traffic that's coming to the same place we are.
One thing that I noticed as a scared airline passenger is that I count to like 22 slowly, and if we haven't gotten off of that runway by then I start to worry, and usually we never make it to 22 or 23. Okay, and then another thing is to know when you're taking off, usually, and tell me if this is right, usually when you get up, you're going to either turn real sharp to the right or you're going to turn real sharp to the left, and then you'll level out. So just be prepared for that sharp turn. Is that right?
No. So we do not figure out our takeoff based on the seconds. Okay.
Seconds.
Yeah, the seconds. We don't count to 25 and then try to get airborne. So
I'm talking about the turn.
Okay. That just is airport dependent. That just depends on the direction of flight. Some airports have an obstruction at the end of the runway, so you have to get out of the way. Some airports, for traffic reasons, they want to separate you from maybe a runway that's right next to you. So you have two airplanes taking off at the same time and you want to diverge their paths. But as far as the takeoff is always determined by the weight of the airplane and the power the engines are putting out. And then we have a one set speed, and that's different for every leg we fly, as that is the speed at which we are going to get this airplane off the ground.
Okay. All right, I hope these tips helped. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments section or hit me up on Instagram or on YouTube, and we'll add them to another video. Thanks for your time.
Bye.